Thanks. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, and you're going to, instead of hearing from biologists, you're going to be hearing from an engineer. So I apologize in advance. But you know, I was asked to kind of, you know, so I manage the dam safety program at DEC, and it's a little known piece of DEC that we actually regulate dams for safety throughout the state. So we're a group of engineers who basically look at engineering aspects of dams throughout the state. And so it's a very different type of DEC program than a lot of other the programs that you might be familiar with. So just some basics. What is a dam? You all are more educated than the general population, but generally this is what people think of as a dam. This is the Hoover Dam with the bridge that was being constructed around it a few years ago and now is completed. So that's what people think of when they think of a dam. But in New York, this is the more typical dam. Where's the dam? It's an earthen dam. And it's got trees all over it, and there's a pond there, and you know, by the way, there's a structure that somebody put in that no one realizes is there anymore. That's the kind of structure we regulate. Is those typical earthen? Typically, those are the kind of structures we regulate. We come across. In terms of, you know, we go by the law. We implement the environmental conservation law. We're under Article 15, protection of waters. And Part 673 is one of the major dam safety regulations. And in Part 673, this is the definition of a dam. It's a structure that impounds or may impound waters. So there's a few different key pieces to that definition. The first is it's a man-made structure. So that's a beaver dam in Cattaraugus County. That's me standing in front of it. 15 feet high, 300 feet long. We don't regulate that. But actually, that pool that's behind it was on the downstream side of a dam, and this beaver dam was actually damaging the man-made dam, and that's why we got involved with that. The environmental conservation law, the major dam safety piece of it is 150507. It's interesting because it actually doesn't define a dam. It just says an owner must at all times operate and maintain a dam in a safe condition. So the other important thing of these definitions is waters. Waters is a defined term that specifically excludes wastewaters. So we don't regulate other impounding structures such as wastewater lagoons, CAFO lagoons, sewage treatment plant, settlement basins, and things like that. No beaver dams. Okay, so typical types of dams we see in New York State. The vast majority, as I said, are 60% are earthen dams. We do have a significant number of other types of dams, typically masonry and concrete. Masonry is stone. It could either be just stacked dry, providing a structure to actually retain an earthen embankment, or it could be stacked with grout, peat put together, and the mass of the dam is designed to hold the water back. So those are the two vastly, the majority of the dams in the state are those two kinds. But we do also have these buttress dams. We don't have it on Long Island, but it's essentially a concrete slab, an inclined concrete slab that retains water on the upstream side, and it's held up by concrete panels or columns. So that's called a buttress dam, or an Amberson dam was actually invented in New York State in the 20s or teens. And we do actually have some arch dams in the state as well. They're much older than the Hoover Dam. So just, if you ever deal with my office, you'll probably pretty quickly learn some of this nomenclature if you don't already know it. We always look at river downstream in our direction. So as you're facing downstream, the dam, there's a left side and a right side, and there's an upstream, which is the impoundment, and a downstream, which is below the impoundment. That's the reservoir. Very typically, you'll have some kind of primary spillway structure. Earthen dams will have an upstream slope and a crest, which is the highest point of the dam. It's typically level, typically one elevation. And groin is where the original dam, or where the dam meets the original valley wall. So there was originally a river running there. The dam was built, and where that dam structure meets the original valley walls is considered the groin, and that's the limit of the dam. And I'll get into that a little bit, but on Long Island it's usually a lot harder to find than in other parts of the state. The outlet, or the barrel, tow drain. A lot of times these earthen dams have drain mechanisms to drain out any seepage that's coming through the earthen embankment. That's the outflow for the tow drain. And oftentimes they will have more than one spillway. When these dams were built, these earthen dams, as I said, there was a river, as we all know, and then the dam was built. The way they were built typically was, or at least in the more modern dams, they laid this pipe in the stream, in the bottom of the stream. And the stream went through there, and they built the dam. That allowed them to build the dam up. That was the diversion of the water. So, that gives you kind of an understanding of how these dams are engineered. Oh, that's not good. Huh. I think something's wrong with the color. What's that? I'll use this image to help outline one more thing. There's typically, as I said, a primary spillway. There might be a single spillway. Sometimes there are multiple spillways. This primary spillway is usually made of a durable material like concrete or steel, and these other auxiliary spillways are sometimes just earthen channels around the dam. When there's a flood, flows rise in the river, and these dams impound water, and the water in the impoundment rises. And so there's typically, some spillway will set the normal pool of the dam, and there's typically this earthen crest is what's considered the non-overflow part of the dam. So it's, there's typically part of the dam structure that is designed to retain all the water. It's not designed for water to flow over it. And so the spillway capacity of the dam is the difference between how much it can store, essentially, how much it can store and convey at the same time during a flood between all the spillways and the top of the dam. And so when we look at spillway capacity of the dam, which I'll get into in a little bit, those are the factors that we're looking at to determine whether the dam meets our requirements.
Can I ask about that? I mean, if you go back to that diagram, I mean, there are many earthen dams here on Long Island.
Yes.
No auxiliary spillway.
Right. A lot of dams on Long Island have a single spillway, so they're more like that.
Yes.
With a single spillway, and that's fine. It's two different
It's not
styles.
a requirement then.
No, either one is acceptable. It just depends on the site conditions when it was built. What seemed the best way to build it. So a little bit about dam safety history. In my previous part of my career, I worked in the New York City DEC office, and I regulated power plants and for air pollution. And one of the first things I learned was about some of the seminal air pollution events in this country that led to the environmental regulations that regulate air pollution. And dam safety has similar kind of things. Every regulatory program, in my observation, has had these events that were dramatic and led to regulation. So in dam safety, the Johnstown flood in 1889 was one of the first events of its type, and it remains to this day one of the worst engineering disasters in American history. There was a very large flood. There was a dam that was owned by a country club made of some of the wealthy industrialists at the time, like Ford and Carnegie and all these guys. They would come from Pittsburgh and Philadelphia and go to this club. And like all good lake owners, they like their water nice and high, so they modified the spillway raise the normal level, and so when the flood came, there wasn't enough storage and there wasn't enough spillway capacity, and the dam overtopped and failed. This is a barbed wire factory that was downstream of that dam. The barbed wire and other debris were mobilized, as floods tend to do. Ended up in the town of Johnstown, Pennsylvania, and killed over 2,000 people. So New York's dam safety regulations date to about 1911, so it just gives you an idea. New York State was one of the early states, as many Northeast states were, to recognize that dam safety was an important thing to regulate. Another more modern, very important event was the failure of the Seatuck Dam in 1976. This was built by the federal government. It was a 300-foot tall dam. If you go on YouTube, you can find some videos that were taken at the time and see the bulldozers that tried to stop that hole from forming. And were almost lost, one of them was lost. The driver was rescued. And I've seen different numbers, somewhere between 11 and 14 people were killed during that event, millions of damage, millions of dollars in damage, 3 or 4 towns were wiped out. And that led to modern dam safety regulations. It led to a federal dam safety program that encouraged states to create dam safety programs, and in New York, it led to a modernization of the dam safety program that had kind of been creeping along until that point. This is the Coloco Dam failure here. That's the pond. The dam was over here and failed in Hawaii in 2006. 7 people were killed in that event. 2 of them were actually from New York. And this is the Hadlock Pond Dam failure in 2005 in Fort Anne, New York. And that was a high hazard dam that failed. 4 homes were destroyed. Luckily, no lives were lost. It was on July 2nd, so people were recreating on the lake, saw the dam fail, and issued warnings. And so people were evacuated, and lives were just barely saved from that event. And I was at that dam the day it failed, so right after the failure. So it's an experience that certainly has influenced me in my work. And this is the Delhi Dam that failed in 2010 in Iowa, I believe. And again, no lives were lost because it was in the middle of the day and people were aware that the dam was failing. So how do dams fail? I talked about inadequate spillway capacity. So this is a drawing of that single spillway dam, and this is the non-overflow section that isn't quite high enough, you could argue, or the spillway is not quite wide enough to accommodate the inflow, and the dam is overtopping. And this is actually a picture of a dam overtopping in Essex County, New York. Another very common way that dams fail is through internal erosion. All dams have water, all dams leak. Earthen dams always have some saturated zone within the earthen embankment. When the water is allowed to flow fast enough through that saturated zone, the soil will carry particles, and the soil will, and as it carries particles, voids become larger, and eventually that will form a void that's large enough to either create a hole through the dam or collapse the top of the dam and cause an overtopping failure. This dam was in Delaware County, March 2011. One of the most common places that dams will fail through this type of failure is along any kind of discontinuity in the embankment. So typically these failures will occur, for instance, where the earthen embankment interfaces with a spillway or with a pipe. It turns out that this dam had actually been modified, unbeknownst to us, without a dam safety permit. These are concrete barriers that are designed to stop the water, the seepage that tends to go along the pipe. They're way undersized. They cause a problem because it's very difficult to compact soil against them, so they actually, instead of preventing internal erosion, oftentimes have been found to promote internal erosion. We no longer allow those. Oh.
Nice.
Nice, right?
Yes.
I don't know where it comes Not on my screen.
Oh.
All right. Good.
Yeah.
Work your magic.
Go plant it, right? You go plant the thing. You have it? Steve. Good.
Maybe I'll stand over here.
There you go.
Oh. Yeah, so most likely, this wasn't the way the dam should have been designed. It wasn't the way the dam was designed. Someone actually went in and dug out the original pipe that had been approved, put it in a new one, didn't compact it properly, and a few years later it failed. Concrete dams typically, as I said, they're designed so that their mass resists the pressure of the water, and so they can fail either by the water getting high enough where the pressure of the water either pushes the dam downstream or tips it over. This dam here is called the Austin Dam. It's in Pennsylvania, just south of Binghamton, New York. It was owned by a company in Binghamton. You can see how thin it is, especially at the top. This is a modern photo. You can go to this historic site where this dam still exists. This dam was built in the 19-teens, and the owner wanted to save money, so they didn't allow the use of as much concrete as the engineer had called for. There were other features that were supposed to be part of the dam design and actually didn't exist. And then the dam actually failed. They went back, redesigned it, said, well, that's just natural settlement. A small piece of it had failed. They said, no, that was okay. They built up the rest of it and filled it up again, and it failed very suddenly. Concrete dams tend to have a more brittle failure than earthen dams, and destroyed the town that was below it. And this was really, so this 1911, New York State had a state inspector of docks and dams, and he was allowed by the government of Pennsylvania to come and investigate this dam, and you can look at their New York Times articles where he's quoted about his inspection of this dam and how it was badly built and the mistakes that were made. So this is an early failure that also influenced the New York State Dam Safety Program in particular very deeply. And lastly, with flow over a spillway with a concrete dam, sometimes the foundation will be washed away, will be eroded over time by the flow of the water. And then the dam can just tip into that hole. And we've actually seen a couple of dams in New York State where they came close to doing that. Luckily, the hole was found in time and filled in with concrete. So that's why we exist. And what do? We're a regulatory program. And so we do a lot of inspections. My inspectors do 400 to 600 inspections a year of dams. We do a lot of technical reviews. We have a construction permit program, and we do engineering reviews of the safety aspects of proposed work on dams. And with the 2009 regulations, we have more tools to actually review owners' ongoing care and feeding of their dams, essentially, and some explicit requirements, for instance, emergency action plans that have to be written for Class B and Class C dams, which I'll explain in a moment. And then ultimately, we do have enforcement power. We can take administrative enforcement action, and when we do that, we seek to either have the dam owner remediate the dam to make it conform to our safety criteria, or we seek to have the owner remove the dam. And if the owner fails to do any of that, then we seek to get the right to remove the dam ourselves. And we've done that in a few cases. And I actually think I have a picture of one of the dams that we did. So as I said, we do a lot of inspections. This is, if you FOIL us for any of our inspection reports, you'll see something like this. Visual observation with some notes, and then some photos of the inspection. And typically, a cover letter to the owner discussing the inspection report and any other regulatory requirements. That's the cover letter. So hazard classification, we kind of have to prioritize our work somehow. So around the country, we're pretty consistent with the rest of the nation and the rest of the world in that we look at potential for downstream damage if the dam were to fail. So in New York, we have 3 categorizations. That's fairly typical. Some states have 2, some have 5. High hazard is basically potential loss of life. Intermediate is significant economic damage or environmental damage, but not likely loss of human life. And low hazard is fairly minor damage. There are long definitions, but that's the gist of it. And hazard class can change. So a dam could be sitting there in the middle of the woods, being built for whatever purpose, and a highway gets built below the dam. That could cause it to be a high hazard dam if that's an interstate. Maybe a factory gets built, maybe some homes get built around the factory for the workers, and eventually you have what was maybe a low hazard dam is now a high hazard dam. And we call that hazard creep. And so with increasing hazard classification, our focus on the dam increases, and what we require of owners also increases, and the regulatory standards increase. And certainly, the effort and the time and money involved in maintaining that dam and being in compliance increase significantly. So just as an example of how much it increases, our spillway capacity requirement for an existing low hazard dam is that it has to pass the 100-year flood. Our requirement for an existing intermediate hazard dam is that it has to pass 1.5 times a 100-year flood, so a little bit higher. For a high hazard dam, it has to pass half the probable maximum flood. So in Long Island, I think the 100-year flood is the flood that's caused by something like 8 inches of water, 8 inches of rain in 24 hours. The probable maximum flood is the flood caused by about 38 inches of rain in 72 hours. But most of that occurs in a 24-hour period. So it's half of that. So approximately you can think of, instead of 8 inches of rain, think of 18 inches of rain in 24 hours, plus or minus. So it's a very significant step up once human life is involved. And so the general idea is, anybody who owns a dam, that's a risky and inherently risky proposition. And so there's an age-old concept that if you undertake a risky endeavor, you're responsible for the outcome. And so what are owners responsible for? Basically everything. It's like when you own your home, you're responsible for making sure the roof doesn't leak. You're responsible for making sure bricks don't fall from your chimney onto the sidewalk and hit people on the head, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to focus on regulations too much here, but you can read them for yourself if you're really, really curious. These are the parts, the actual subparts of Part 673 regulations. So these are the parts, the left side kind of talks about, the left side and up to the property transfer notification is basically what owners have to do. There's a whole lot of stuff. Most of it applies to Class B and Class C dam owners. A little bit of it applies to Class A dam owners. And then this part talks about the powers of the department, which are very significant. The vast majority of dams in the state are privately owned. There was a little bit of discussion about that. They're small ponds, essentially. Mostly farm ponds, some wildlife ponds, some wetland complexes, things like that. DEC, these numbers are a few years old. DEC, I think, is up to figuring out that we own something like 550 dams now. We're the #1 largest dam owner in terms of numbers of dams in the state. But the state in general owns a lot of dams. Local governments own a lot of dams typically as part of their water supply systems. And there are public utilities, and the federal government owns some hydroelectric dams and some flood control dams. So just getting back into the law and the regulations a little bit, there are really two major parts of the dam safety laws and the regulations that flow from that. There's a dam safety piece of it, which is that part Environmental Conservation Law 0507, and from that Part 673, which talk about owner responsibilities and dam safety. And then there is 0503 and 511 a little bit, and mostly Part 608, which talk about permits. So they're a separate part of the law and the regulations than the safety piece of it, and it's a construction permit program. Neither of these contain the spillway capacity requirements. Those are in our guidelines for design of dams, which is like a technical guidance document. So because it is guidance, there is some flexibility, some engineering flexibility in terms of meeting those requirements. And of course, the dam industry, dams actually encompass several different civil engineering disciplines, and so there's a whole body of work related to dam engineering that we use. For your purposes, these are the important size thresholds that most of our regulations key on. So there are some parts of the regulations that have no size thresholds because there's no definition of dam in the dam safety law. But in Part 673, when we wrote it, we tried to apply it a little more rationally to dams that have a potential to cause some kind of damage versus dams that probably are way too small to cause any kind of damage. And so these permit thresholds are in the Environmental Conservation Law for the construction permit program, but we apply them across the board to a lot of the other provisions. So essentially, if a dam can impound less than 1 million gallons or it's less than 6 feet tall, very few of the regulations apply to that dam. If the dam is between, can impound 3 million gallons or more, or it's 15 feet tall or more, then the regulations apply. And so our job is to kind of implement the regulations and not get a ridiculous result, which can be very difficult on Long Island. So here's, what's the dam? Is it just this spillway structure? Is it maybe, does it go to here with a little bit of a non-overflow? This is a slope actually, so it's not that, nice depiction that I have of a flat crest. I don't know. This entire thing could be is arguably a dam. This is, where's Waldo? Where's Damo? The dam's buried under here somewhere. This is the Peconic Sportsman Dam, I think. So I don't remember if it was you or Chart had originally, when I first came for our first Fish Passage conference years ago, and they were trying to put fish passage, a fish ladder, I think, on this dam, and we said, well, one of the problems is, trees are not allowed on embankment dams. And he said, well, the dam is made of trees. And I didn't understand what he meant until we got there. And literally the dam, there's more biomass in this dam than there is soil. And there's no even crest, there's no elevation of the crest here. And so, how do you figure out the height of the dam to figure out even if the permit applies? Interesting cases. Yeah, what's the dam height? So, the dam embankment probably should have been up to this wall. That's a typical way that this dam would be constructed. However, it's eroded or whatever, and the height is here, but then it kind of goes up from there as you go along the embankment. So what's the, and really this is very tall, and you have very small watersheds on Long Island, so you don't have huge rises in normal water surface. So yes, we say the maximum impoundment and the height of the dam are at the top of the dam. But is it realistic to think that the water could ever get this high? Arguably no. We saw a picture of this dam before. And actually the picture that was shown was very helpful because, so we looked at this dam. What's the height of the dam? Well, okay, let's discount this, the railing, I would say is here. But then you look at, I don't know if I have a picture of it. Yeah, that's Argyle Lake. The dam is, I believe, this structure here, right? But around here, the land is actually lower than the top of the dam, as was shown in the other picture. So, it's kind of like, okay, what's the height of the dam there?
And the interesting thing with that dam structure is those two little ponds to the west have culverts leading from the lake into those ponds and then under the highway and back into the stream.
Down into here.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yep.
So, I mean, one could argue that maybe this is part of the dam as well, structurally. So we get some unique cases. And I won't say there's nothing like this in the rest of the state, but Long Island certainly has a much higher share of these type of challenges than the rest of the state. All right.
Here it comes.
All right. So, as you all know, dams do provide important benefits. That's why they were built. Many dams continue to provide important benefits. Certainly on Long Island, people like their lakes as everywhere else. People like fresh water. They like the scenic beauty of it. They like the recreational opportunities. In many parts of the state, dams are essential for water supply systems for major metropolitan areas. Dams provide flood attenuation. They probably provide some significant flood attenuation in certain parts of Long Island. They provide hydroelectric power, not so much on Long Island. And many people perceive that dams and lakes provide habitat where there wouldn't be habitat. They provide wetlands of a sort. But they're not natural and they're not permanent. I've observed in my life that people think that however they remember things being in their childhood, that's how things always were. And so if the dams on Long Island were built in the 20s, most of them, let's say, or earlier, most people alive today have always lived with those dams being there and with the lakes being there the way they are today. And so it's very strange for them to think about what things might be otherwise or what things might have been like. So the benefits and challenges to dam removal, and I tried to compile this from my experience in working on over a dozen dam removals in my career. Certainly they reduce the hazard from dam failure. Along with that, one of the major motivators for dam removals in the state is to get out from the dam safety regulations, especially after 2009, where we really modernized our regulations, and for some dam owners, they became much more significant. I talked about that reservoir rising during floods. Well, if someone lives or has infrastructure along that reservoir, sometimes the dam actually causes flooding. As opposed to attenuating flooding downstream, they cause flooding upstream. And I think there are a couple of dams on Long Island that are being looked at with Sandy money for increasing resiliency by reducing the upstream flooding that dam is potentially causing. Restoration of natural conditions, and certainly, some of the nicer dam removal projects that I've seen in the state and around the country improve the scenic and recreational opportunities in the area. And I think that's really important for you folks who are looking at dam removal is, to understand that that's a very significant thing that you have to present to the public. Some of the challenges, it's a construction project. It's not just a planning exercise. It's not just something that you can go into without planning and without engineering, oftentimes. There can be short-term environmental damages that are caused that people will be concerned about with your dam projects. There's oftentimes sediment releases that can damage the downstream area if not properly addressed. There are many types of permits, like construction stormwater permitting. There may be infrastructure upstream. There was one example shown in Massachusetts where the pond, there's infrastructure in the pond that if the water was lowered, that would endanger that infrastructure and bridge piers and things like that can often be subjected to additional erosion if the pond is taken away, that they were built assuming that that pond was always going to be there. So there's significant engineering that can take place, that can be required for some of these projects. There can be a possible increase in flood hazard downstream due to the loss of the attenuation. There can be a lot of public opposition to loss of the lake that people always know were there. People may have memories of their childhood fishing on the lake. They may have had their first date there with their wives or whatever. I had my first date with my wife at a dam, actually. I wasn't in dam safety at the time. So that shows it, you know, like these are important things for people. And the public will have many concerns with these projects. So I have not come across any two projects that were the same, honestly, in dozens of projects. They all have their unique concerns and challenges. Some are more than others. I call it the Dominintz rule is, if you're looking at a dam removal, you should be prepared that the removal project will have the same, approximately, order of magnitude complexity as the dam construction project did originally. So if you're removing a small dam, maybe it's not going to be so complex. If you know, the larger and more important the dam is, the more complexity you should expect. The Elwha Dam, someone had mentioned before, that project took 10 years to plan and engineer and cost millions of dollars. It was like 150, no, I think it's less than 100-foot tall dam in the western part of the country. But many projects can be done for tens of thousands of dollars, probably not less than that in New York. And some of the projects may actually be much more complex than the original dam construction, because the dam construction occurred when there was really no other, you know, there's virgin land, no pollution upstream, no surrounding property owners. It was pretty simple. You just go and build a dam. There's no regulations. I'm just going to go and do it. Today there are a lot more regulations and a lot more concerns surrounding the dam from all sides. So this is one example of a one aspect of dam removal that often people have to deal with. And I'm not an expert on this. I got these slides from our floodplain management folks. So please don't ask me too many questions about it. But just as an example, is this conditional letter of map revision and then map revision process. So if you're on a FEMA floodplain mapped, flood insurance program mapped stream, you're supposed to go through this process if you're going to change the stream. So again, when you remove a dam, you're potentially going to get increases in flooding downstream of the dam and decreases in flooding upstream of the dam. And you're supposed to do the engineering to revise the flood maps to show that project. And if you're potentially causing downstream flooding, the folks downstream may end up being forced to buy flood insurance where they didn't before. Flood insurance costs, if you're, I think the least it costs is $600 a year, and it goes up from there. And the federal subsidy for flood insurance is being reduced year by year, and eventually will become close to actuarial perhaps. So that $600 is the subsidized rate, and it's increasing, you know, the dollar value is increasing as the subsidy goes down. So that alone can cause a tremendous amount of oppositions because you're hitting people directly in their pocketbooks. And the local community has to be involved with this process. So on Long Island, I think you have more government-owned dams than, you know, as a percentage than the rest of the state. So that's kind of an advantage, I think, because, you know, the same entity that owns the dam is going to be having to deal with these other aspects of it. But there is a local government component with all these projects. So some examples. New Waterville Dam is in, I believe, Oneida County. It was a water supply dam. Back in the early 90s, DEC told the village that the dam does not comply. It's a high hazard dam, does not comply with the safety requirements for a high hazard dam for spillway capacity. So you have to drain it, and they did. And so they left it drained. They went back and forth. Well, we're going to use it again. We're not going to use it again. The 2009 regulations came out. There was going to be a lot more that they were going to have to do if they wanted to keep the dam. They decided to breach it. It had been drained pretty much for 10 years before that. It filled up every now and then when large floods came by, it would drain back out. And so it was already a drained reservoir, no sediment to deal with. They went ahead and just breached it. It was very easy to get a permit. They just had to show that the breach was going to be large enough. They did a lot of the work with their municipal forces, like as they had time over the summer, and it was done. This is a dam also in the Adirondacks. I think Essex County did this one. I think it had been a former water supply intake dam for one of the villages there. They weren't using it anymore. They didn't want to be subject to the regulations. Again, a fairly simple project because they didn't have, because it was a water supply and they were using it for intake, they didn't have a lot of sediment issues to deal with. And it was basically a concrete demolition project. This dam is owned by the New York State Parks Department. It's in Fahnestock State Park in Putnam County. And they also kind of went back and forth about what they wanted to do with it. Finally decided they wanted to breach it. They submitted a permit application to breach it. Hurricane Irene came along, did the job for them. So they just had to clean up the site a little bit. They had to increase the breach a little bit, but again, a pretty simple project. And that's what it looked like when they were done. So there's still a remnant of dam here. You can see that a lot of it has been lowered, perhaps not, they wanted to retain some of the sediment that was in the impoundment, but there is a notch through here to allow the frequent flows, the base flow. So a lot of times the notches will be sized to at least accommodate the base floats. So you get, instead of a wide, shallow flow, you get a narrow, concentrated flow like you would in a natural stream. This is the dam I mentioned that we removed. This is in Delaware County. We removed it in 2004. It was one of my first projects when I came to dam safety. And this dam, you can see this white is grout that was put into the dam to try to hold it together. Didn't work. You can see that it's splitting apart here. It was made of very poor concrete, and it was right above the village of Fleischmann's. And the dam goes off another few hundred feet to the left of this picture here. And so we removed the vast majority of the dam and tried to get some fish passage through there. And as the other speaker, I think you had mentioned, like in the middle of the project, and this photo, there's a footbridge where this photo is taken. You can stand right above the stream, right below the dam. And, we're in the middle of the project and we see fish jumping up there. I mean, it was really amazing. And actually there was a guy who was a French chef, and he lived in the area, and he would come by every day, and he saw the trout, jumping up there, and he got really excited. I think he had trout for dinner.
Yeah.
And this one was actually done this year. So this is in Dutchess County. In 2012, we visited the dam, and this is what we saw. This is the dam. This is the dam owner's home. That used to be the mill house, the mill building, when the dam was built. And that was significant. In 2013, we came, and this is what we saw. The foundation had eroded away, and the whole stream was passing under the dam, actually. So we told the owner that that was a dangerous condition that she needed to address. She was an elderly woman. She passed away, actually, right around, I think, 2014, and we dealt with her daughter quite a bit. She was fortunate to get a DEC grant to remove the dam, and I think this picture was taken in August of this year. I think the way they built this dam was that they built the dam and then they built the mill building. So the access to the dam was where the mill building was now. So there was very difficult access for this project. And the access requirements, there was a steep slope requirement. This town has a steep slope permit program, and the dam removal was going to cost something like $50,000, and the project ended up costing something like $250,000 in order to get the road in there. But this is what it looks like as of, I think, early September this year. That's looking downstream. And this is the Hogan Program, which was also breached earlier this year. This is up near the St. Lawrence. It was a partnership, FERC, Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, regulates this dam. It's owned by a power company, and the St. Regis Mohawk tribe, I believe they border this river. And so they were very interested in getting this area restored, and they ended up coming to an agreement with the power company, and they sponsored this project together in front of FERC. They got an engineering company, and they removed part of the dam, and then they removed the other, first they removed half, and then they removed the other half. And that's September 16th photo. We have a website. The dots I showed you, the map of Long Island, is available through our website. It's a Google Earth coverage that you can download, and you can look at all the dams. You can see a little bit of data on each dam if you click on it. There's also the GIS coverage, which is the same dams, but more data on each dam is available through the New York State GIS Clearinghouse. So if you're interested in that, you can download that. We try to update that data about once a year. You can also, if you contact my office, we can send you the spreadsheet of the raw data, and you can manipulate it yourself if you want. This is another dam removal that was done in 2010. And that's all I got. Do I have time for questions, or?